Jackson Smith-Njigba came into the game with 96 receptions, which was third best all-time for the Seattle Seahawks in receptions. With 8 more, he now has 104 to set the Seattle Seahawks reception record in a single season with 104 receptions. Welcome to Just the Stats NFL Top 10s for Friday. I'm Ernie Jennings, your host, and we got some good things to talk about today. Man, that game, Thursday night game between the Rams and the Seahawks, was really incredible game. Those two teams could see each other later again in the playoffs, depending on how it works out. But we'll talk about that game, talk about some of the NFL season leaders. We'll finish that up, looking more at the receivers and some of the other categories, maybe on defense as well. And then we'll see what time we have left and maybe cover a couple of other things. So that's what we're going to do today on this Friday. Don't forget, tomorrow on Saturday, we do have some football. So Saturday, Sunday, Monday, NFL football. Can't wait for all that. But that game last night on Thursday was really incredible, back and forth, and just an exciting game all in all. So let's take a look at the game, and we'll get going here with this podcast today. All right, so the game ended up with Seattle winning at 38-37 in overtime, and it finished that way because the Rams went down the field, scored a touchdown. Seattle came right back, also scored a touchdown, but then made the 2-point conversion to seal the deal. The Rams could not stop them. The Rams had pulled out to a decent lead. They were winning 13-7, and then they were up by 16 points. They were up by 16 points, gave up a punt return for a touchdown, and that just cut the score. It really looked like the Rams had this game wrapped up. They had intercepted Darnold for the second time, and but then they turned right around, and in just over a minute, they had to punt, and when they punted, Shaheed ran it back for a touchdown. That just cut the score, and then they made a 2-point conversion, Seattle did, and all of a sudden you got a game that's 8-point difference. Seattle was able to score again and tied the game up. It was an incredible game. It really actually looked like it was kind of a fluke, honestly, that the Seattle, in a way, they still could have won the game, I suppose, but a couple of plays happened that were just kind of interesting. One was just a field goal kick by the Rams that the guy missed. It was 40-something yards. He missed that. That would have put the Rams up by 3, would have made it even more difficult for Seattle. But then on the 2-point conversion, how fluky is that? It's a pass that appears to be a forward pass, incomplete pass, and the ball just kind of drops on the ground, and Charbonnet for Seattle just picks it up in the end zone and hangs on to it. Everybody thinks the play's over. Now the Rams are winning 30-28, and Seattle looks like they're going to lose this game. Lo and behold, after review, it's a lateral. It was not a forward pass. It was a backwards pass. And the fact that that Charbonnet happened to pick it up in the end zone, it's a 2-point conversion. How freaky was that? I mean, anybody could have picked that ball up, but he happened to walk over there and just pick it up in the end zone. It counted as a 2-point conversion. It took a few minutes. No one really knew what was happening until all of a sudden they said the play's under review, and they're looking at it and they realize it's a backward pass. How crazy was that? But that tied the game, and then it went into overtime, and the Rams moved right down the field and scored. But then again, like I said, they could not stop Seattle, who ended up scoring and making another 2-point conversion. They made 3 of them. It was really crazy. Guy on that last one for the win, wide open. Darnold had too much time standing back there. They couldn't put any pressure on him, and he just waited, and the guy was wide open for the 2-point conversion. So it was really a fun game to watch. Let's look at some of the stats. Now, these are some incredible stats. We'll start with Seattle. And some of these things were amazing numbers here. But Sam Darnold, 22 for 34, 270 yards, 2 touchdowns, had 2 interceptions, and was sacked 4 times. But he hung in there. He kept coming back despite the 2 interceptions. Kenneth Walker, 11 carries, 100 yards, and 1 touchdown. He really looked good. One of them was 55 yards. He had a run for 55 yards, but man, he looked really good. He's an enigma. Sometimes he just doesn't look good, and Charbonnet does so much better than he does. But not last night. Walker really was impressive. Zach Charbonnet, 9 carries for 32 yards and a touchdown as well. In the receiving department, the Rams, and this was a flip. I mean, this game was interesting. They completely shut down Jackson Smith-Njigba in the first half. No catches for him. But by the end of the game, 8 catches, 96 yards, and 1 touchdown. Kenneth Walker, 3 catches for 64 yards. So like I said, a big game for him. He ended up with a total of 164 yards, touched the ball 14 times. That's more than 10 yards a pop. One of his catches was for 46 yards. Cooper Kupp, man, he made a big mistake. He fumbled the ball early in the game, but came back, had an impressive sideline catch, toe tapping, falling out of bounds catch that was good for a first down, and when they really needed it. That's Seattle I'm talking about. But he had 3 catches, 39 yards. So overall, really good on their side. Now, Matthew Stafford, this game was not lost by him. Their defense just could not stop Seattle when it needed to. Matthew Stafford, 29 completions on 49 attempts for 457 yards. 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, was not sacked. So really, he carried this team as best he could. Kyron Williams, 23 carries, 70 yards, so not impressive particularly. And 14 carries by Blake Corum for 48 yards and a touchdown. So again, just okay. 39 carries in this game for 124 yards. So, barely 3 yards a carry in this, just over that. So Seattle held him in, as far as the rushing went, but they did try to run it, but they also passed it quite a bit. Now in this game, this was Puka Nacua. No other player on the team had more than 3 catches, but Puka Nacua, 12 catches, 225 yards, and 2 touchdowns. They couldn't stop him. He's so impressive to watch and had some big runs, 58-yarder, just looked incredible. 225 yards you racked up. He's really putting some pressure, and we'll look at it next week on the season numbers as far as receiving goes, but he's going to put some pressure on Jackson Smith-Njigba as far as who's leading the NFL in receiving by the end of the year if he keeps up at this pace. All right, that's some of the numbers in this really incredible game. Now, let's look at the top 10s that were set in this game. There was a lot of them, too. The first one, we'll start with Matthew Stafford. With his 457 yards, he was in 16th all-time in passing yards in a single season for the Rams going into the game. With 4,179 yards now, he moves up to 8th spot, passing himself and Jim Everett, who was on the list twice. One of those will now be knocked off there. So he's already in 8th spot. Couple games to go. He'll easily move up another at least to 5th. But with 457 yards, I mean, he does that again a couple more times. He's 700 yards away from breaking his own record of 4,886. So he'd need a couple of games with 350, which is not impossible. Man, he had a good game. Now, Puka Nacua went into this game in 5th place in receptions in a single season for the Rams with 102. With 12 more, he jumped over himself, and in 2023, he had 105. He moves up into fourth all-time with his 114 receptions. He only needs 3 to catch Torrey Holt and 5 to catch Isaac Bruce to move into second. He'll easily do that. But like I said previously in a podcast, Cooper Kupp leads the team, the Rams, with 145 receptions, which he did in 2021. So with only 2 games to go, he won't catch him. He would need 31 more receptions. Very doubtful on that one. But he did rack up 12 this time, but still, even with that, he'd need 15 and 16. So, but Puka Nacua did miss a game as well, and that really hurt him. He would have definitely had a chance to break the record if he had not missed that game. Now, in the yardage, Puka Nacua came into this game in 11th spot for the Rams in receiving yards in a single season, with 225, and now he has 1,592 yards. He jumps from 11th all the way to 5th, past a slew of people, including Elroy Crazy Legs Hirsch, who was in 5th in 1951 with just under 1,500 yards. So Puka Nacua now 5th place with 1,592 yards receiving. Boy, he has a little outside chance to catch Cooper Kupp here. Probably not, but he definitely should pass a couple of people. Torrey Holt has the 3rd and 4th spot, and now he's just 100 yards behind 3rd place and even less than only 40 yards behind 4th place. So definitely a chance for him to move into 2nd or 3rd without a problem. Puka Nacua has really had an impressive season. All right, moving over to Seattle. Jackson Smith-Njigba came into the game with 96 receptions, which was 3rd best all-time for the Seattle Seahawks in receptions. With 8 more, he now has 104 to set the Seattle Seahawks reception record in a single season with 104 receptions. New record set by him, broke his old record, which he set last year with 100, which had tied Tyler Lockett, who also had 100. What's amazing about that is until 2020, when Tyler Lockett had 100 receptions, no Seattle Seahawk had ever had 100 receptions in their career. That's just amazing. I mean, they had some really good receivers, but no one ever made it to 100. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett did it that one time in 2020, and that was it. Well, now you've got Jackson Smith-Njigba taking over the top 2 spots, and looks like he could rack up several of the top spots by the time his career is done with that team, if he stays with them. Now, Sam Darnold in passing yards came in at 10th. Now has 3,703 yards to pass Seneca Wallace to move into 9th spot in a career 3,703 yards. Good game for him. Now, in rushing touchdowns, Kenneth Walker was tied for 5th with Sherman Smith at 28. With 1 more, he now has 29 to move into 5th place all-time by himself in that category. And he won't get any farther for a while. Chris Warren is in 4th, who played in the 90s. He has 44, so it's a long way to the next level. But he did move into 5th spot all-time in that category. All right, that's a look at that game. Took a little bit of time, but so many records in this game. Stafford's been incredible this year. Nacua's been incredible, and so is Smith-Njigba. So they've all just been racking up some big numbers this year. All right, let's shift over to looking at some other things, and we'll look at some season leaders now. And this is going to change, obviously. I'm not factoring in the game last night, but so you'll have to keep that in mind. But there will be some changes to this chart depending on what other receivers do as well. But Puka Nacua is going to put some pressure on Trey McBride here when we look at receptions in a single season. Well, in a season. The season leaders we're talking about just for this season and who's leading the NFL in that category. So Trey McBride right now for the Cardinals has 105 receptions to lead the NFL. Now, like I said, Puka Nacua just racked up 12, so he's jumped it back into the lead. But, Trey McBride still has to play, so we'll see what happens by the time we look at this chart again next week. But anyway, Trey McBride, as of week 15, has 105 receptions. Puka Nacua was in second with 102. And then Jamar Chase had 101. They were the only players over 100 receptions. Smith-Njigba was fourth with 96, and of course now he's up to 104, but he'll probably be passed easily by Jamar Chase, who only would need 3 more. And we'll see what the rest of the NFL does. Christian McCaffrey still on this list as the only non-receiver player. He's in 6th right now with 86. He only had 1, so he's been slipping down this list. He was at one point first, believe it or not, and stayed consistently in the top 3, but slowed down somewhat. Like I said, only 1 reception last week for him. A couple of tight ends. Jake Ferguson actually is on this list. And, of course, Trey McBride leads the NFL. Also interesting on this list is the way it's working so far for the Cowboys. You got George Pickens at 8 with 81 and Jake Ferguson, the tight end for the Cowboys, with 77. So you got 2 of the top 10 on the same team here. But what's funny about that is when we look at the next category of receiving yards, well, here you've got George Pickens in 3rd with 1,212, and you got CeeDee Lamb with 976, and Ferguson is not on this list. But leading this category is Jackson Smith-Njigba with 1,541 yards, well ahead of Puka Nacua, and he'll stay ahead of him even after this game yesterday. So the top 2 players in receiving yards were playing last night on Thursday night. Smith-Njigba put up 96 yards, while Puka Nacua put up 225. So he's going to close the gap on him, but he won't catch him. But what you will see now is Jackson Smith-Njigba is not the only player who's averaging over 100 yards a game. Puka Nacua now is as well. So those two will have jumped out. They were already way ahead of anybody else. Like I said, Puka Nacua has 1,367 after week 15. George Pickens was 3rd with 1,212. So he had a 155-yard lead over the 3rd-place guy, and that's just going to increase for sure. Now, new to this list is Jameson Williams, comes in at 10th with 936 yards. So now you have 2 Cowboys on this list, and you also have 2 Lions. Amon-Ra St. Brown is in 5th with 1,140 yards, and now you got Jameson Williams coming onto the receiving yards top 10 list as well. He had been kind of, I don't want to say a bust because he's doing well, but slow, I guess, to get him around to becoming such a big part of their offense. And they're going to need him if they want to have a chance to even make the playoffs. That's their big struggle at this point in time, just making the playoffs. But now, after week 15, there are now 7 players who have 1,000 or more yards receiving. And with 3 more, CeeDee Lamb, Zay Flowers, and Jameson Williams all needing less than 70 yards to do it themselves. So you could see at least 10 players by the end of this next week. Now, looking at receiving touchdowns, well, Devontae Adams still leads by a healthy margin. He's got 14. He did not play in this game. He's got an injury, sat it out, and hopefully he'll be able to come back in the next couple of games that the Rams have. But he was such on a good pace, and now with that game, it's going to slow him down as far as any type of records he might have had a chance of setting. Same thing happened, in the rushing department with Jonathan Taylor, who was on a huge tear, just took off, was so far ahead, but his pace is also slowed down. Now, Amon-Ra St. Brown racked up a couple of touchdowns last week. He's up to 11. He's in 2nd with 11 receiving touchdowns, and then Trey McBride has 10. He's been so impressive. Leading in 3rd in receiving touchdowns, first in receptions, and he's in the top 10 in yards as well. Just been very impressive player. No team has 2 players on this list, at least in the top 7. After that, there's 6 players with 7 receiving touchdowns. Only 3 players have 10 or more this season. So nobody's really jumping out there, except for Devontae Adams, who was and who had to be sidelined. So that hurt his efforts. All right, let's look at receptions by running backs. Now here you have Christian McCaffrey, who's been leading this all season. Bijan Robinson did jump over Jahmyr Gibbs to move into second with his 10 receptions that he had. And he definitely gained some ground on Christian McCaffrey because he only had 1. But still, even despite that, Christian McCaffrey has 86 receptions after week 15. Bijan Robinson, who's in second, has 64. Very doubtful with only a couple games to go that anybody's going to catch Christian McCaffrey as far as receptions by running backs this season. Now in third is Jahmyr Gibbs with 62. And then Devon Achane has 61. Only players with more than 60. Now, Christian McCaffrey was definitely on a pace to get to 100. But with 3 games to go, he still should be able to do it, but not if they're changing their setup where he's only getting 1 reception or a couple of receptions in a game. So we'll see what happens and if he can actually do that. It's really hurting his efforts overall. And we'll look at his scrimmage yards as well. Now, moving on to receiving yards by running backs. And that is Christian McCaffrey again with 820 yards receiving. Bijan Robinson has closed the gap somewhat. He's got 684. So he's still 140 yards almost behind Christian McCaffrey. And then there's a huge drop down to Jahmyr Gibbs, who has 494. So almost 200 yards between second and third. 190 yards exactly, but that just shows you how big Christian McCaffrey and Bijan Robinson are to their team's receiving games. And after that, like I said, Jahmyr Gibbs is pretty good at 494. Achane again is 450. Those 4 players are the best by far. Then there's a big drop off even after Achane from 450 to Chase Brown with 336. So well over 100 yards there difference, 114 to be exact. And then it's just a smattering of people after that. So really, those 4 players, and especially McCaffrey and Robinson, are key to their team's receiving game as running backs. All right, let's move on to some defensive numbers here. And as I said, Myles Garrett's just been crushing in this category of tackles for loss. Tackles for loss, Myles Garrett leads this category with 32 tackles for loss this season. Max Crosby has 26. So 6 tackles for loss difference between those 2 players. But then Tuli Tuipulotu for the Chargers has 19. So that's a 7 tackles for loss difference between second and third. That just shows you the difference these 2 top players, Garrett and Crosby, have been doing in this category compared to everybody else. Because from third, where Tuli has 19, down to Nick Benito has 13. It's only 6 difference between third spot and 8th spot. And in fact, there's 6 players with 12, so there's a 7 difference between the next, 14 players. Just shows you how great Max Crosby and Myles Garrett were. Now, Nick Benito, he has a big game coming up himself. Jeffrey Simmons had a good game. He's 7th with 14. He had those tackles for loss and a touchdown last week. So he had a good game for himself there. Myles Garrett and Max Crosby, with their numbers, are in the NFL top 10 all time in tackles for loss right now. And Myles Garrett is making an effort to set the sack record as well as the tackles for loss record. Sack record is actually more in play than tackles for loss is. And speaking of sacks, Myles Garrett leads this category by a mile. 1.5 sacks, he'll break the official record. 2 sacks, he'll break the unofficial record. But Myles Garrett has 21 and a half sacks. Brian Burns is second. He plays for the Giants. He has 13. So he's got 8.5 sacks more than the second place player. And it's just down from there. Micah Parsons, who unfortunately was injured, he's out for the season. He was in third with 12 and a half. So having a good season, but he's gone for that team. And who knows if he'll stay on this top 10 list by the end of the season with 3 games to go. Now, Max Crosby wraps up the top 10 with 10 himself. So having a really great season all the way around for him. One of the few, in fact, basically almost the only bright spot for the Raiders this season. All right, let's look at this crazy category here. And I picked it because just because of the top 2 player teams here, and also the fact that so many of these teams are actually good. Top 10 teams with most penalties. The Jacksonville Jaguars lead this category with 117 penalties this season. The Denver Broncos are second with 112. And I picked this category because those 2 teams are playing each other this Sunday. They lead the NFL in penalties. That's just amazing. I often think that penalty, and they do hurt your team as you're trying to win a game. But when I'm looking at this list, it's a smattering. You've got the Jacksonville Jaguars and Denver Broncos on the top 2. Broncos have the best record in the NFL, and yet they are right there at the top as far as penalties committed. But also on this list, you have the Philadelphia Eagles, the Chicago Bears, and the Houston Texans all in the top 10. They're at the bottom end of the list, but they're still in the top 10. And then sandwiched in between, you do have some bad teams like the Tennessee Titans, the New Orleans Saints, and the New York Giants. They're right in the middle. So my point being, I guess sometimes penalties aren't as damaging as I would have thought. Obviously, it can be very timely when the penalty happens as well. Jacksonville had a slew of penalties early in the season of formation type, illegal formations and so forth like that. And I think they've worked through those. Now their penalties, they had 3 personal fouls on late hits and things. So they got to clean that up. All in an effort on their part to be a team that's tough, physical. But sometimes I guess it gets carried away. Just an interesting stat on this most penalties. All right, we'll do one more here, and then we'll call it a wrap. This is in the sack department. I picked this one, top 10 teams as far as sacks. This is the Denver Broncos with 58 sacks. Now, one of the things we didn't look at is turnovers. They do not get a lot of turnovers, but they do sack the other team by far much better than any other team. So Denver Broncos have 58 sacks through week 15. Atlanta Falcons are second with 48, so 10 behind. But from second to 10th, there's only 12 sack difference. So Denver Broncos have been leading this category pretty much all year. Atlanta Falcons 48, Cleveland Browns 47, and then there's a big drop down to Seattle Seahawks with 42. Being that the Seahawks played last night, I know they did not have any sacks, so they're not going to move anywhere. In fact, might get passed by a couple of teams. The Rams had 4 sacks. They'll move from 30. They were in 9th with 37, so they'll have 41. They'll move up this list a little bit, be right behind Seattle. Those 2 teams will be close in just about everything they do. That division or that conference is going to be interesting in the playoffs, as is the AFC. All right, so that is a wrap for this podcast. We got some big games coming up. Man, I can't wait to see some of these games that are so incredibly important. Saturday night, like I said, 2 games on Saturday. The Eagles and the Commanders play the first game, and then the Green Bay Packers and Chicago Bears play Saturday night. That game will be another one to see if Green Bay can put themselves back into first place again. That division's flip-flopped so many times. There are some games that make no real big difference, obviously, as we're getting farther into the season. The Chargers and Dallas Cowboys play on Sunday. That's a big game for the Chargers. Now that the Rams have lost, the Chargers could pull into a tie with them, and they own a division record. They have that division tiebreaker, I should say, that tiebreaker for the Chargers have that for themselves. Dallas Cowboys need to win out and hope the Eagles lose all their games. That's kind of doubtful. Tampa Bay, Carolina play for first place. They're both at 7-7. They play on Sunday. So that's a big game for them. And then, of course, the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Denver Broncos play Sunday afternoon. And that's a huge game. Jaguars really need to win that because Houston's playing the Raiders. And so you know they're going to win unless it's just a massive upset, which very doubtful. But it's going to be a tough game if they do win that game because they got to go into Denver against the team with the best record. And then on Sunday night, New England Patriots play the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens need to win that game. And now that the Patriots have lost and only a game up on Buffalo, they need to win as well. So that'll be a good game. And then on Monday night, the last game, San Francisco 49ers, 10-4. Oh, I messed up on that with the Chargers. Chargers are more worried about Denver. They're hoping that Denver loses. I always do that with Chargers and the 49ers. But the 49ers are 10-4, a game behind, a chance to tie the Rams for second place there. So that'll be a good game for them. And then Indianapolis Colts, they need to win out basically. So that's going to be a tough game for them to win. It is in Indianapolis though. So let me go real quick to the Chargers. Chargers in the AFC, not the NFC. So it has nothing to do with the Rams, but they do have a 10-4 record and they're hanging in there. They win their game. Denver loses their game. That puts them in a position to possibly catch the Broncos. So they'll be looking forward to watching Denver lose if you're a Chargers fan. All right, that's a wrap. Appreciate you listening. Please like and subscribe to this podcast. You can watch this podcast on Just the Stats NFL on YouTube, where you'll see all the charts for the games that I talked about today and all the stats and so forth like that. Yeah. And you can also, of course, listen to this podcast on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you happen to listen to your favorite podcast. Appreciate all those listening. Appreciate the latest subscriber that I just had. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this upcoming weekend, enjoying the podcast. I have so many ideas for going into even next season, but I'm trying to work out all the wrinkles this season. So appreciate all those people listening. If you have any thoughts or comments, please feel free to share those, leave your comment, and I'll check on it and get back to you. All right. Well, for NFL Top 10s for Friday, I am out. I'll talk to you again on Monday.